Welcome to Discograffiti, Hell's a Poppin', the music podcast that delivers the objective truth about the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever existed.
I was dozing off there for a second, but I got woken back to life.
That was the verbal equivalent of electroshock therapy. So I'd like to spill a little bit out for my EP homies in a certain sense, because this is, we care so much about this podcast that Joe and I are doing this for a second time tonight.
This was one of the first ones we cut, and we've gotten kind of better at it since we've started doing it.
You're being very democratic. I fucked it up.
Okay, well that's another way of saying that.
I was being.
I was amazing. I'm going to just edit out. I'm going to edit out all my comments from that and just paste it here, and then just go. And then I'm going to go play.
You should do a box set of disembodied comments.
I'm just going to paste in all the genius things that I said, and I'm going to sit in the corner and play Zelda right now while you do this.
Just paste out my stuff. That's all. Anyway,
it's kind of like when you see those early episodes of The Simpsons, you know, and they're kind of like drawn all like
Bart's looking all fucked up.
Yeah, it's like that.
Yeah, but worse.
Someday on the Discograffiti Rarities box set, we'll re-release those.
That's right.
It's like the rooftop concert. It's like the holy grail of.
We'll only be doing deluxe physical editions.
Discograffiti ephemera, lost classic.
Right. Okay. All right. Back to business. So first things first, you guys need to know just how seriously we take this shit.
Discograffiti is heavily researched, and all these releases are listened to with fresh ears.
And they're not just albums. No, that's for chumps. We do a searingly honest deep sea dive of everything. EPs, singles, comp tracks. If it's a live album that somehow pertains to the history, we'll do that too.
And then every release is slapped with an objectively accurate 5-star rating from 0 to 5.
Which allows us to come face to face with the beautiful, true shape of an artist's overall arc.
In today's episode of Discograffiti, we will be turning the spray cans on Badfinger.
Which makes me very sad, because the last thing they deserve after what they've been through is spray canning.
Can I just say, for the record, I'm Badfinger.
It's the stink.
He's the man with the bad in touch.
Wait, wasn't it initially Stinkfinger?
I think that's apocryphal. I don't think it was ever Stinkfinger.
I think you're saying it's apocryphal because it's a conversational diversion you just don't want to have.
I'm perfectly happy to have that conversation. Okay. I did not come across that in any of my research.
Okay. Most of my research centered around that.
How different would it have been? Maybe they would have, if they were Stinkfinger instead of Badfinger. None of the horrible things would have happened to them.
Or maybe all of the horrible things would have just happened quicker. So I've always liked the hits with these guys, but honestly never had any idea about the tragic depth of their story until the very first Mojo I ever picked up, which was in, I believe, December of '98. Rundgren was a big feature in it.
This is Mojo the magazine.
Mojo the magazine.
Not Mojo the like ephemeral quality.
No.
It's not the first time you came across Mojo itself.
No.
This is the magazine you're referring to.
I'm not talking about Chi, the life force. So I read about Badfinger, could not believe. I didn't realize that the two guys who had written Without You had wound up hanging themselves. It's horrible.
Right. I kind of knew about Badfinger from being a fanatic Beatles fan when I was a kid.
Right.
So I read like every Beatles book you could get at the time, and they had that association. McCartney writing "Come and Get It," them being on Apple Records. So I knew about them. That was kind of my first introduction to them, and I knew all the hits kind of like everybody else. There's like 4 or 5 kind of big major hits,
and they're kind of masters of melody, just like the Beatles. And plus, if you layer on top of that a whiff of tragedy, I generally am all over that kind of shit. But these guys have the chops to back it up.
Yeah, you kind of can't separate their story from some of the records that they made.
Right.
So, I mean, but obviously we'll get into it.
It's one of the saddest tales in rock history. I would probably put it side by side with Moby Grape for the two saddest tales in music history. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
It's that kind of thing for sure, yeah.
So let's delve in and see what in the flying fuck went wrong. Phase 1, twee AF. And for you old timers, that's twee as fuck. 1967 to 1970. So Badfinger, initially a band called the Ivies. They're a Welsh band formed in 1961. Tom Evans joins in 1967, and they are the first band signed to Apple Records, the Beatles label, in 1968. They're renamed Badfinger after the working title of With a Little Help from My Friends, which is Badfinger Boogie.
Right. Notably not Stinkfinger Boogie.
But I'm telling you, it works its way into the story somehow. I'm telling you. All right, so Mal Evans, whose fingerprints are all over this band, in the most unsavory of ways. So
I guess Mal kind of found them in the first place.
Mal found them and fairly did produce them, but Mal and Peter Asher, who is Apple A&R, and also Peter and Gordon fame, saw Badfinger live at the Marquee, and in July of '68 they were signed. Initially, Tony Visconti and Tom Evans both produced, and they were off. These were a gang of nice guys who didn't want to step on each other's toes.
And at this time, they're they're still kind of developing their sound. They're kind of more on that sort of left bank twee pop kind of vaguely.
without any tension. So this is like real like dandy fop kind of stuff, velvet collar kind of deal.
Yeah.
That without much complexity in the songwriting.
Well, they had a couple of jams.
Yeah, definitely some good stuff. But it's very nice and polite.
Right.
So which sets up this kind of thing right at the outset. So their band was a classic democracy, although clearly Pete Ham was the blazingest talent in the band by a mile. So this is the central tension of this band.
Yeah, it's they tend to share songwriting duties on records.
Almost down the middle.
Yeah, sometimes some of them get more songs on certain records, but the ratio of how good the records are is almost, you can plot it on a chart with how many Pete Ham songs are on the record.
That's right.
There's a direct proportional relationship. You know, some of the other guys have good tunes. Most of my favorites are Pete Ham's songs.
But the other guys tend to have great songs, but they're more journeyman, workman, like craftsmen.
Yeah, Pete Ham has a fairy dust kind of magic, and he's the strongest singer in my opinion of the four.
Yeah,
and
he's got something to say. He knows how to convey some really profound, deep emotional truths. The other guys don't really have that capacity.
He has good style as a singer, and it really puts the songs across well. So
yeah,
like you're saying, it's a democracy, even though it probably shouldn't have really been a democracy.
Which is crazy, as we'll see album by album, why that was a stupid idea. So in 1969,
well, the problem is they let like the third best songwriter, who's far below the other two, write an equal amount of songs some of the time. So
just for the sake of democracy, maybe because of the times.
Yeah.
Not quite sure. But in 1969, their first release as the Ivies, which is called Maybe Tomorrow. I do want to say that Maybe Tomorrow is kind of of historical interest only because most of the best material was carried forward into their next record, Magic Christian Music.
Yeah, most of them were. Most of the best songs in this were redone for the next record and kind of done more beefed up and sounding kind of more full. These are kind of more proto versions of them. The title track is the one I kind of maybe prefer the Ivies version. Maybe. It's kind of a little more AM radio-ish and a little bit like less.
I think the only real worthwhile non-Magic Christian music song is Mrs. Jones, which is actually an outtake from this. So, this is a weird record. It wasn't released in the U.S. or in England because Alan Klein withheld it. So right out of the gate, their problems had started. They were already in kind of a messy legal tangle because of what was happening in Apple. So by dint of that, they were swirled into that maelstrom and they got effed.
Right. So the Magic Christian is the movie that in the recent Beatles Get Back documentary. that is the Beatles are basically using the time at Twickenham that was left over. So the Magic Christian was an Apple project, so that was the next thing that came in. So that's the movie that they were doing the songs for.
Right.
That's why Peter Sellers is hanging out at Twickenham Studios.
Exactly. So in December '69, they changed their name to Badfinger officially
after a brief stink finger period.
Right. That's incredibly well documented for the Come and Get It single release. So they also ditched Ron Griffiths and brought in Joey Molland, who was once in a band called the Fruit Eating Bears. And now they were ready. I give Maybe Tomorrow 2.5 stars. Truly an unnecessary thing to own, unless it fucks Alan Klein in some way, shape, or form.
I gave it 2.
Okay, yeah, we're on the same page with that.
Kind of like you said, you kind of don't really need it because they did most of the songs better on the next.
Most of the best songs.
Good songs.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Okay, in 1970 we have Magic Christian Music, and this is ostensibly the soundtrack. McCartney had them basically copy his demo of Come and Get It note for note. Pretty much promised a number one. That is what happened with the song. It's pretty much a perfect little song. And if you hear his demo, it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah. It suits them well, and it has that really, McCartney stir. It's almost like kind of like an early solo, like Another Day, or like some of those early first couple of McCartney singles. You can hear it fitting in real well with that.
So Apple basically took the film's 3 Badfinger songs, took 4 songs that were unreleased, and 7 older tracks from when they were still known as the Ivies, from Maybe Tomorrow, and made this better album, which was remixed, and definitely the better investment if you were to veer off of our playlist, which is not advised.
Yeah, this one is a much like kind of punchier, more rock band kind of sound. There's some real gems on this. Mal Evans gets a production credit on this record, which is always weird to me. Mal was not really a musician. He's kind of like he was
lovable lunkhead.
Yeah, right. He was an inner circle guy in the Beatles circle. He was kind of like their roadie / gopher. You can see him kind of in in the Get Back movie. They're like, George tells him to go, like, can you think you can find me like one of those bolo ties?
Yeah. He's basically he's a professional congenial presence.
So it's kind of weird that he's like gets production credit on these. The record sounds fine.
Apparently that is what he did. I mean, that by all accounts. I actually, I looked it up along with the Stinkfinger stuff. So this is I would say, you have some McCartney involvement beyond Come and Get It. Rock of All Ages and Carry On Till Tomorrow were produced by McCartney. There's a few, absolute classics. Crimson Ship is excellent. Fisherman, Angelique. Walk Out in the Rain is an early Pete Ham masterpiece. This is definitely a lighter side of Badfinger, but pretty strong. I give it 3.5 stars.
I gave this 3. Dear Angie, that's another one. That's kind of one of their more popular.
That's a great song. Yeah,
it's interesting to see which of these are their most popular, most streamed songs on Spotify. Dear Angie's kind of near the top.
I will say that, we start getting introduced to an element that recurs through their career and is not really dealt with successfully until toward the end of their life as a band. They cannot rock convincingly.
Yeah, there's sort of 2 sorts of songs they do. They have like kind of singer-songwriter, pretty songs,
which are amazing.
Yeah, which that's mostly what we're going to be pointing you towards.
And the rock songs are so dreadful that you just kind of have to accept that, okay, they're going to be cluttering the album just like every dead bootleg has Chuck Berry shit on it. So you got to endure that.
Yeah, there's kind of like a lot of sort of things in the kind of boogie kind of feel,
Right. And they're all dismissible. There's not one exception.
There's kind of some that sort of have like a sort of like Bad Company kind of stylings, like blues rock. So those are always it's the fewer of those you get on a record, the better the record's going to tend to be. But they're sprinkled in there pretty consistently, unfortunately.
So you gave this one 3?
I gave this one 3. Notably, Tony Visconti produced most of the ones on this that are my favorites. Like he did Crimson Ship and Dear Angie. McCartney got the production credit on "Come and Get It." This is a pretty solid album. I would say I would rank it higher. Like my kind of standard go-to rating for like a generic genre album is like 2 stars if you make a competent album. This seems a little bit better than competent.
It is.
It seems a little bit more inspired.
The Ivies one is more competent.
Yeah, that's more like a 2 kind of. But this is like this has some good. It's not wall-to-wall strong material, but definitely stuff to pick out. And a step forward for them.
I do want to talk about some context, because around this time things kind of shifted for them. Some seeds were planted that sprouted complete and utter dog shit.
Well, the first thing though is that "Come and Get It" is a huge hit.
Huge hit.
Right. So they are kind of, they must be thinking, hey, we got this. We're on Apple Records.
Yeah, we got a giant.
We
hit.
just recorded this McCartney song. It went to like number 1 or something. It was a
we're
big hit for them.
Hanging out with the Beatles. We have a contract with Apple. So around this time, actually in November 1970, there was a businessman in New York named Stan Polly who signed Badfinger to a management contract. So
he's a businessman the same way that like John Gotti is a businessman.
That's right. So
maybe not that extreme, but
he formed a company called Badfinger Enterprises, Inc., which sounds pretty much on the level. This is the least on the level company with the most normal name. So this bound the band to all kinds of agreements that took their profits and shoved them into holding companies that Polly controlled exclusively. So the band were on a salary. No matter how high they were riding, no matter how many number ones they had, they were on a salary, which wound up causing obviously tremendous tension, and frankly just killed the band eventually.
Right. So there's kind of a few different dimensions to the Stan Polly saga. Not only did they have that situation where all their royalties and earnings were going into the escrow fund that they couldn't ever get a hold of, but then he negotiated this crazy record deal with them. That comes a little bit later on in the story. Stan Polly, we could kind of talk about him a little bit. The next year in 1971, after he had already started managing them, he was named as an intermediary in an investigation. It was like some scheme between corrupt judges and like what are called unnamed crime figures, which I'm assuming are kind of like mafioso kind of guys. So he's in with this scheme to like bribe judges, and he's kind of a go-between with those guys. And
you see all kinds of shadowy figures that lurk around the rock cognoscenti, the
music business,
like
was
Matthew Cates with Moby Grape. People looking to destroy people's lives, basically.
Yeah, the music business was really like that. Yeah, it's still kind of like that a little bit. But
but this was
this
aggressive. This was aggressive destruction.
Yeah, he was a professional grifter. So he managed Al Cooper for a while and a couple of other lesser artists.
But during this time, what was a strange dichotomy. While the seeds were planted for their destruction, Badfinger were riding high out at George Harrison's pad, playing, as his backup band on All Things Must Pass, along with Derek and the Dominoes.
Right, they're featured heavily on All Things Must Pass. They play a lot of that record. Has a lot of like kind of these chimey acoustic guitars, like 6 and 12 string guitars. That's kind of the backbone of a lot of the
Plus
sound.
Ringo's that don't come easy. You have Pete Ham and Tom Evans in the background. You have Tom Evans and Joey Molland on John Lennon's Imagine. It's
all 4 Beatles are kind of hanging out with him.
Yeah, and then
plus Mal Evans,
and then and most importantly, lovable lunkhead Mal Evans. But another thing was a concert for Bangladesh. They were all over that as well.
Right.
So they aren't seeing that what's going on behind the curtain here.
They're having a good old time in 1970 or wherever.
Right, and then musically too, they're starting to peak, and that's why we are at phase 2. And just like that, power pop's born, 1970 to 1973. So in 1970, we have No Dice, which, by the way, the trilogy, right?
Yeah.
No Dice, straight up your ass.
Except the problem.
It doesn't work because there's no your.
Okay, so they made an album called No Dice.
Right.
Then an album called Straight
Up.
Then an album called Ass. Somehow those are supposed to go together.
They're supposed to link. I swear.
Okay, all right, all right.
Follow this under Stinkfinger, but I swear to God, I read this. In any case,
Even if ass was called Your Ass,
right.
which is amazing title, by the way.
Yeah, it is.
It still doesn't make any sense. No dice, straight up your ass.
I know.
Is that a saying or something?
Why would that be an important enough saying to stretch over 3 album titles? It's
straight up. Okay, the last two, straight up and Your Ass. Okay, I get.
It's an interesting decision.
What does No Dice have to do with it?
So No Dice is it's an interesting record. This is the first LP with Joey Molland on it. No Matter What is on this album. That was a number 8 U.S. hit, and I'm going to posit that this was the very first power pop song ever.
Yeah, this is on the this and probably this and like Go All the Way, the Raspberries.
This is first.
This is first. So those two to me are kind of the.
So then you have a less important song to me, a much more important song to them. Without You is on this record, which has been covered by over 180 artists by last count.
And it went to number 1 twice with Harry Nilsson and Mariah Carey.
But I will say that in the terrible, I'm not buying them as rockers category, there's some really, really bad shit on this record.
Well, the problem is it starts off really rough. The first like 3 songs are kind of like boogie rocker.
I Can't Take It, Love Me Do. Those are not good songs.
So it starts off.
Watford John is another shitty rocker.
Yeah.
Without You, oddly, is not a good song at all. I mean, in the verses, it's a skeletal, bass-heavy, plodding slog. The choruses, they're straining to hit the notes.
Yeah, so I don't really like any version of Without You.
I don't
even really like Nilsson's version of it.
Me neither.
And I love Harry Nilsson.
Me too.
That's the best version of it.
I agree.
But
we're on a streak here.
The Badfinger version, it's Tom Evans singing it in the chorus, right? And
it's not good.
He cannot hit the note. He
it's
can't
just
even.
Not
so
good.
He sings it like in this choked off,
I can't live.
Well, he hits it just real quick, like can't
live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No and it sounds very tentative, and it's.
Here's the good stuff on this record. I Don't Mind is a warm little pop song that's going to go on the playlist. Midnight Caller is a Pete Ham classic.
Yeah, right. So that's one. That's a solid ballad, and it kind of shows not only is he the best writer but the best singer. He sings that one really nice.
Gorgeous. No Matter What, that is the beginning of power pop. That is a great song. Talk about a perfect little pop song. It's a classic.
Yeah.
We're for the Dark is the underexplored, unexamined, steaming pile of diamonds at the end of this record.
Yeah, that's my second favorite song on the record.
What a great song. Holy Christ.
Very classy, nice arrangement and changes. It seemed like they kind of wanted to maybe make that a single because it has
that should definitely have been a single.
It has a nice classy like
it's
string.
Anthemic. It's got like a Here Comes the Sun kind of a quality to it. Also, I want to mention there's an outtake from 1971 called I'll Be the One, which is a group co-write, a classic. That's going on the playlist.
Yeah. So No Dice is it's kind of a mixed bag.
I'll give it 3 stars.
I gave it 3 as well.
The good stuff is fantastic. The highs are very high.
Yeah,
but the rockers suck.
Yeah, they kind of Joey Molland's new in the band, and he kind of like is on this a lot. There's maybe like 4 Joey Molland songs.
4 too many,
and they're kind of all in this sort of like like butt rock kind of space.
But even look, the first song, that butt rock song, I Can't Take It, that's Pete Ham.
Right.
Pete Ham wrote that song. He's just as guilty. In 1971, they came out with Straight Up, which many consider, and rightly so, to be the apotheosis. At least commercially, they've hit a zenith here.
It's like the Empire Strikes Back of the No Dice Straight Up Your Ass trilogy.
That's right. It is. It is, at least numerically. So Jeff Emmerich of Beatles fame and George Harrison of Beatles fame, they started producing, and then Rundgren finished.
They're in good hands with both of the producers. So they started the sessions. Like 3 or 4 of the songs are Harrison's. Day After Day, Name of the Game, Suitcase. Those are all cool songs. Harrison wanted them to go for a more like sophisticated. Like he basically wanted them to make something like Abbey Road that was a more mature and sophisticated kind of record.
Yeah, they intervened basically because Apple was like, "Look, you guys can't rock.
Right.
You're not going in a good direction with the way that your albums are split schizophrenically." And they actually stamped that shit out for the most part.
Yeah, so the Harrison produced songs have really nice arrangements. Like, the Day After Day has the great, beautiful weepy slide, and
Leon
all
Russell
great
piano.
all the great backup vocals. So the songs kind of start. That's kind of how the record they were making was a kind of more adorned, kind of overdub. When Rundgren came on, they were like, we got to get this thing finished, and his songs are kind of more direct rockers.
Is that Money?
He produced like a Suitcase,
Money, Flying.
He finished Suitcase.
Okay.
But a lot of the kind of the bangers.
I'll tell you my favorites: Take It All, Baby Blue, Name of the Game, Day After Day, and also Perfection.
Yeah, right.
Which is kind of like feels like a more minor key swing on No Matter What.
Well, Take It All is the opener, and that's one of the Rundgren ones, and that one sounds really good. I like his production on that. It's a very direct, straight ahead production. It's kind of them just playing as a band. He has a certain kind of sonic fingerprint as a producer.
I also like the flat, effectless tone on the vocal. It for whatever reason makes it a stronger.
Yeah, the rock records that Rundgren was producing at this time in the early '70s had this kind of like dry, punchy, like compressed kind of sound to them. And this
album sounds fantastic.
He got good results out of them. I feel like. I think they had kind of a difficult relationship working with him, as you do.
Yeah, but, inverse ratio.
But
good album to shitty relationship.
Right, as you do, he gives you a good album at the end.
He does, because there's not a single bad song on the record. There's very good to great songs all over the record.
Yeah, I think he's good at like cracking the whip too and getting like
right.
He did Baby Blue. That has become their most famous song.
This album is the one they're kind of known for. I would give this 4.5 stars.
I gave it 4. I would dock it because there's too many Mullins, too many Joeys on this one.
There's a couple songs that aren't quite as good as the others, but there's nothing that I don't like.
It's a strong album. It is. 4.5, totally reasonable, I think.
And of course, right when they're at the top, Phase 3, Everything Falls Apart, 1973 to 1975. So in 1973, Ass. So already they're kind of...
Or as it should have been called, Your Ass.
Your Ass. Already we've gone from they're at the pinnacle, they're having big hits, and then they get super cynical immediately. So first off, let's talk about the cover, okay?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the cover of this goddamn album, shall we?
It's kind of awesome.
There's a fucking donkey and a carrot. Okay, so... This is the, I'm never going to get the thing I was looking for album.
Yeah.
But the problem is...
They're the donkey. They're the ass, I guess.
Yeah, they're the ass.
In this metaphor?
They're the ass.
The carrot is money.
Success.
There's
some guy named Stan Polly not taking all their money.
It's kind of a giant sky carrot. Someone's dangling it off in the distance.
I think it's the sky dildo of fate. That's what I think it is. So at the start of '72, Badfinger were contracted for a final album with Apple,
which was in tatters at this point.
Yeah, they were in
for non-Badfinger reasons.
Right.
Badfinger was probably one of their biggest money makers up to this point.
Right. So if you ask Joey Molland, Stan Polly told the band that Alan Klein actually wanted to cut the royalty rate that Badfinger was making and make them pay for their own studio time.
Yeah,
so
that's a fine thank you for
seriously.
making a hit record.
So the fourth and final album for Apple, Ass, sessions had begun in early '72, and there'd be 5 recording studios that would be involved over a year. So Rundgren originally was going to produce, but quit over money during week 1. So the band produced itself, but Apple then rejected the album. Finally, Badfinger hired Chris Thomas,
they hired him kind of as a fixer to fix the stuff they
came in and pull it together. Honestly, this record kind of has a desultory air about it, but there's reasons for that. So while this is going on, if I may just continue unfurling the carpet a little bit. In the meanwhile, Stan Polly negotiated a deal with Warner Brothers that one of those Emmett Rhodes type deals where there's no way you could ever satisfy the demands of it. So it was supposed to be every 6 months they deliver an album over a 3-year period.
Right, and
6 albums in 3 years.
And that started like basically right away. So this one was so for starters with Ass, there was like there was some sort of publishing fuckery why it couldn't come out. Like Apple didn't own Joey Mollen's publishing or something, and then so they ended up stuffing it full of Joey Mollen tunes.
The only one who took a Paul McCartney like stance toward him was Tom Evans, who was suspicious from the go, but the band signed the deal anyway. And Ass only got to number 122 after having these huge hits. And the lead single, Apple of My Eye, which is one of their best songs, it didn't even reach the top 100.
Right. Apple is kind of not really functioning as a promotional entity at this point. They're at the end of their deal anyway.
So tell me, is there a thing where contractually behind the scenes, if you can somehow get a bunch of jackasses in a room and have them sign a bunch of papers, that you could make more money off them not being able to satisfy a contract than you would if they could?
There's a couple things going on here, it seems like, with their finances. For starters, Apple is kind of petering out. Ass is the last album that ever came out on Apple that was not by a Beatle.
Right.
It was the last album by an artist that wasn't one of them. And it's kind of uncommercial because they gave them no resources to make it. It doesn't sound very good. It sounds very flat.
Sounds horrible. It's their worst sounding record.
They had just gotten done working with great producers on Straight Up, Rundgren and George Harrison. They had kind of access to the best of everything, and then they became kind of an afterthought. They didn't really know how to. It's a giant step down, self-produced, going from a truly great producer to producing yourself, and you don't really have any experience doing it.
Plus, let's talk about the songs. 5 of the 10 songs were written by Mollen,
Yeah, I
which
think
is a fucking death sentence.
That has something to do with their publishing thing, because Apple didn't own his publishing rights. So,
So Pete Ham gets 2 tracks. The second track, Timeless, which ends the record, is the worst song he's ever written. It's really just supposed to be sort of a ripoff of I Want You, She's So Heavy. And Apple of My Eye is great. And then the only other song to cherry pick on our playlist would be, I would say, When I Say by Tom Evans.
Yeah, I would only really put Apple of My Eye on there.
Yeah.
It's not a very good record. It's kind of has an overall shoddy kind of quality to the production and arrangement. They kind of perked up the quality after this. This one's a dud.
Yeah, it really is.
This one didn't work out.
It is. And one that I'd like to single out as being especially bad is Joey Mollen's Constitution. Let me just say that if I want to listen to Badfinger, I'm not going to listen to them for a song that chokes out some Hendrix aping riffs.
It's got that one like Purple Haze chord in it.
Yeah. It's just not a good look on these guys.
Yeah. So they finished that, and now they're
2.5 stars.
I gave it 2.
Okay.
2 is even kind of like
You're a nice guy.
I don't foresee myself listening to that much.
You're a nice guy. All right, 1974 brings us the eponymous record,
and now
also known as For Love or Money.
Right, they're on Warner Brothers.
Right, for the unfulfillable contract.
So that's the other part, the other moving part of what's going on with them financially is that they signed this deal where they got to make like how many records and like they make like
2 a year.
2 a year.
So listen to this shit. 6 weeks after the Ass sessions had been wrapped, they re-entered the studio to start recording material for this record. That's fucking insane.
Yeah, which is much better. It's a much better record, and they do seem kind of a little bit reinvigorated. There's some weird things on it. There's like it doesn't sound very consistent, like even sound wise internally. Like it sounds like certain songs kind of have a nice bright kind of like polished sounding production, and then
some songs sound like they were recorded on a porch.
Yeah, some songs sound like there's a blanket over the speaker. Like there's wildly varying engineering quality.
But I kind of do like that. It feels like Ass had sort of a flat, effectless feel to the whole entire thing. Like it just felt tired and the same.
This parcels out the flat, effectless songs throughout the album.
No, there's a bunch of stuff I like on this.
This was pretty good.
Yeah, the singles I actually don't like. Love Is Easy and I Miss You are not songs I would have chosen as singles.
I Miss You is a little bit saccharine, but kind of nice though.
The best songs are Shine On, which is so good it's almost like a commercial for happiness.
Yeah, that's a good gem that we would recommend. Most people probably don't know that tune.
No, it's a great one. Song for a Lost Friend. that jerky stop-start rhythm. That's a really, really good power pop song.
Great hook.
Yep.
Really, really great hook.
Lonely You, really, really good. It's around here that Pete Ham songs start sounding like goodbyes to himself. And
that one has a real effortless kind of quality. Maybe not like his
beautiful song.
Maybe not his absolute top shelf, but a very good song.
Very close to it, I think. And then a really good Gibbons song, the Homunculi and the Drungs.
We haven't talked about Mike Gibbons.
So My Heart Goes Out is a Gibbons track that I like very much.
He writes occasionally, and he kind of delivers every now and then.
He kind of does.
He's not bad.
He kind of does. He writes in sort of an eagerly, like a low-key, eagerly sort of capacity.
If you watch him playing live, he has kind of a crazy style of playing drums. He has this hunched over kind of like
Mickey Rivers from the Yankees.
It's kind of like it's kind of like he's like, I don't know. He's got this crouched over. I guess it's like Mickey Rivers.
It is. Come on, admit it.
Yeah, nobody's going to know what that is.
If you're 49, you do. All right. So I would say that this album is 3.5 stars.
I gave it the same.
Nice.
3.5.
Beautiful, dude.
And this one, it's 3.5, but this one has a wide variance to it, where there's some really good ones and then there's some really bad ones.
It's true.
But overall, I think
I don't like Matted Spam.
that one's weird. That's like that funk jam.
Yeah. They're, listen, on their records, generally, almost all their records, except for 2 records, there's bad shit sprinkled in.
When they break off from the formula and do some other experiment, it rarely works out.
Rarely, except for the next record.
As musicians, they're good, not incredible. They're good, solid musicians, and when they're at their best, they're playing really well together as a band, more of an ensemble sort of thing. So when they are kind of in these other formats, like when they're playing kind of boogie rock or like Matted Spam is kind of like a funk porno sounding.
Yeah, it is. It is porno-y.
It's kind of like they don't really have the musicianship to really like play in a million different genres seamlessly.
Right. They do one thing great.
Yeah,
and
right.
So they should have stuck with that. They should have had a manager who made them do that.
And then when they're at their best in that, they can play together in a way that's really transcendent. That sounds really awesome.
They're as good as Big Star. In the power pop genre, they're kings.
Yeah, when they're clicking on all cylinders.
So I would like to talk about something before we go into the next record that is an important thing to look at and discuss and kick around with Badfinger, which is the idea that crisis and forks in the road and devastation can create great art. This is really a testament to the idea that insurmountable personal turmoil can produce a diamond.
Right. So the period at Apple ends kind of it fizzles out, and there's kind of like the bad business deals are becoming apparent, because at this point they've sold a lot of records, they've had a lot of success, and they're not seeing the checks.
And they know the rot has infested, and that it's sort of like too late. So, but
like you can hide it sort of at like early days when maybe you've had like a hit song. Okay, the money's not really rolling in yet, but at this point they've had several, rather successful songs.
And
they sold over their career 14 million records.
That's amazing. And
so to be broke all the time, something ain't right.
And then the wheels really go off with this one because, to me, I know, Joe, you don't agree with me quite on this, but hands down, this is one of the greatest albums of all time. 1974's Wish You Were Here. Not a widely talked about album, which is very strange to me. Mm-hmm. I do own it on vinyl. It is, along with the eponymous record, it is definitely one of my favorites. You don't like it as much, right?
I mean, I like it a lot. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite albums of all time, but it's amazing for what it is. It's one of the best power pop albums ever made.
It's a unique power pop record because most power pop records don't have any kind of level of intensity to it. And
it's ambitious.
There's a vibe in this record of them both going for motherfucking broke and simultaneously crying out for help in a really direct way. And so it has this live wire intensity about it that
it has an underdog kind of charm to it, especially if you kind of know the story. I think that's kind of what we were mentioning earlier in the intro. You kind of can't separate the story of where they're at from the greatness of this album. It's weird, even like power pop dorks who like are obsessive about this stuff. This doesn't really have even a cult following so much. This record,
right?
You would to me one of the more underrated records that I can think of.
It's insane. So
it's a true 5 5-star record. I don't think there's really any way to get around it, but it doesn't have that kind of reputation at all.
Not at all. So let's turn the magnifying glass down and go through song by song, because this one actually earns it. So the record kicks off with Pete Ham's Just a Chance, which, talk about fucking majestic, towering, monstrous, arena-sized power pop.
And this is another one,
it's just recorded so big.
And they play it great. So this is really this one is where they really play the best, I think, as a band. Where like I was saying before, when they're at their best, they really kind of when they click, it sounds really amazing.
But they're playing so well as a band together,
right,
that finally they have figured out how to rock convincingly.
Yeah.
This late into their career, they have finally figured it out. And the rock songs on this album are the best songs on the record.
Right. And some of the songs that are maybe a little bit more slight, they put them over really well.
Right.
Because they're playing so well. And I don't know, something, it just worked out on this one.
And the record is textured between,
and they don't have the problem of the varying qualities of engineering and mixing.
Right,
Everything sounds good.
And the songwriting is of a piece, because those guys were all going through the same thing at the same time now. So You're So Fine is the second song. Mike Gibbons' track, Eagerly Pop, slight but really good.
That's kind of what I was getting at. They play it so great. It just really works.
Got to Get Out of Here, which is one of Joey Molland's best tunes, in my opinion, continues the vibe of jittery paranoia. Great ballad. No One Knows, absolutely incredible. Just an impossibly celestial, overblown rock and roll tune with strings. Townsend Windmills.
Right. If you're a power pop aficionado and you don't know this song, you will love this song.
It's a dream come true.
It's one of the sorts of things that I say this from time to time on the show. That's the sort of thing you hope to kind of come across when you do.
That's right.
When you do this sort of focused listening,
your heart just starts to pound when you hear it for the
great
first
song.
time. Yeah, and then my favorite song on the record, and possibly my favorite ever Pete Ham song, Dennis. Mm-hmm. At least the most undersung praise-wise. Nobody even talks about this song, but side B has two epics that were fused together, Frankenstein-like. You have In the Meantime / Some Other Time, a one-time Mike Gibbons, Joey Molland co-write.
Cool. That's kind of one of their...
it's a disco prog experiment.
Yeah, that's one of their more idiosyncratic kind of tracks, kind of a curveball for them, but it's cool.
I like that one.
It's cool.
It's kind of weird.
Pretty much everything on this is at least pretty good.
Yeah, the next song is the slightest tune. It's a Molland song, of course, Love Time.
See, that one to me, I think that I like that one a lot. That seems
really?
like that could have been a hit. In fact, we re-recorded this a few months ago, and I kind of went back and re-listened to this album in particular, and that one kind of stood out to me.
That's the one that stood out?
Yeah, that I kind of maybe slept on the first time.
That one never really stood out to me quite as much.
Seems like that could have been a hit song.
Then you heard it, A&R people across America. You heard it here first on Discog Graffiti. King of the Load, a great little Evans number. Then finally, Meanwhile, Back at the Ranch / Should I Smoke, a Ham, Molland, Frankenstein experiment that is absolutely killer. Wouldn't you say? Perfect closer.
Yeah, I think this is kind of the peak of their ambition as a band, where they're really going for it and really trying new things and swinging for the fences.
It's just fireworks, 4th of July fireworks.
Yeah, the hook really hits hard. They're kind of going for broke and they pull it off, and it's a perfect end. I mean, they could have ended right there, and everything would have been fine.
They could have,
at least
but
in terms of the story.
They were shoved right back into the studio. So, first of all, 5 stars on that one.
5 stars for me too.
Hard 5.
Right.
So while all this stuff is going around in the background, Warner Brothers is getting all kinds of red flags about Stan Polly. Go figure, and his horrifying ability at returning a phone call. And then there was the matter of that escrow account of advance funds. So. With regard to their contract, Stan Polly was supposed to keep $250,000 into in a safe deposit thing for safekeeping, and would not reveal the whereabouts. Would not return phone calls. Eventually, just completely disappeared.
I think he kept it in a sack with a $sign.
That's right. That's right. With stink lines coming off him.
Then he drank some rum out of a jug with 3 X's on it.
So here's what happened was Warner Brothers terminated their contract with Badfinger. But
this is right after Wish You Were Here came out, right? So
this is during the whole time. So rather than having the group sign new contracts, Polly just disappeared. So it didn't resolve it, nothing. So it was released and withdrawn from record stores in early '75, 7 weeks after release, because of all these lawsuits that were going on. So then imagine that your album, not only your album, but your best album, you're playing like like your lives depend on it. It's taken off the shelf and you are pushed right back into the studio. And in 1975, they recorded a record that remained unreleased until the year 2000 called Head First.
Yeah, and at that point, it's like you got to say, like, why even bother? After the record gets shipped and then gets returned, you got to give him points for having it being good sports.
But they still, I mean, here's where it gets insane for me, because you get into that mindset of how could they have been interpreting all the madness that was happening to them, and how could that have even allowed them to become creative in that kind of situation, and yet they still pulled out a very good album.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
There's really good stuff on it. So it was recorded December '74 to January '75, not released, and a rough mix was made by Phil McDonald, who's an Apple recording engineer. The songs that I like, "Lay Me Down" is it's relatively rote ham pop, but pretty decent. "Hey, Mr. Manager" and "Rock and Roll Contract," both Evan songs that don't really beat around the bush lyrically.
Those ones I can't get into.
But you got to admire them for what they are, right?
The titles kind of say it all.
The poor dudes. That's all I'll say. The poor dudes.
Yeah.
"Keep Believing."
I feel like this album's going to get some sympathy stars.
I like the album. I actually always liked it.
It's kind of you have to kind of put it in the context of what they're doing. So if you kind of listen to it and appreciate it in the context of like the world has kind of crashed down upon them, and it's like this kind of like, what's the point of even going in and making it?
And they're still making music that goes la la la.
They're still giving it the old college try, trying to do their best. So
"Keep Believing's really good.
That's one of the best ones.
One of Pete Ham's empty pep talks to himself.
That one's very sad.
It is sad.
It has a very resigned kind of sadness to it.
It is.
It's "Keep Believing," but it's kind of
he's not believing shit. All right, so "Moonshine." This is a really beautiful pop song.
Nice ballad too. That one kind of has like a little quickie sort of feel to it, like they did it kind of like.
I love that song.
But
it's
nice.
And then "Back Again" is Homunculus' best song, Mike Givens.
Mm-hmm.
I like calling him Mike Givens.
Like Robin Givens.
Yeah, I like calling him that better. "Back Again" is that guy's best song. And then if you buy that CD, if you buy things like that, there's two really good demos on a demos disc that we strongly recommend. "Nothing to Show" and especially "Time Is Mine." I give the whole package 3.5 stars, my buddy Joe.
I didn't like this as much. I gave this 2.5, and
you're a sick human being.
I feel like it's kind of padded out and not really kind of full of great material. There's a couple things that are pretty cool. Again, I give them credit for sticking with it, but it ended up being kind of a swan song.
And then before we go into what happened next, there are a couple of Pete Ham demo collections that are available. One is called 7 Park Avenue. The other is Golders Green. These are mostly 2-track bedroom demos with some studio demos thrown in for good measure. A few things that we're going to pluck on the playlist. From Golders Green, the song "Dawn" is amazing. And then on 7 Park Avenue, "Would You Deny" and "Dear Father" are classics, even though they're just demos. And then I especially want to single out "No More" and "Ringside." The reason I want to single those out is because these two songs started pointing to a much more serious emotional shift for Pete Ham.
Getting darker even.
Right. So things are getting, now it's not just cynical, now it's really nihilistic and bleak. And around this time, apparently Ham started exhibiting pretty alarming behavioral patterns.
Some self-harm going on there.
Homunculi Givens recalls him burning cigarettes on his hands and arms, some such thing like that. But anyway, before we continue, the demo packages, I give 4 stars just as a total thing. So then what wound up happening, unfortunately, their albums taken off the shelves. The follow-up is rejected. The early months of 75 found Badfinger just trying to figure out how to move forward. Their March 1975 salary checks didn't even clear. The April checks didn't arrive. And Pete had just bought a big house in Surrey, and his girlfriend was expecting. The band tried to manage without Stampoli being involved by contacting booking agents themselves and trying to get gigs and prospective managers throughout London. But because of their ties to Polly, it effed everything up. Nobody wanted anything to do with them.
Yeah, in retrospect, I wonder if they could have gotten some other legal representation that could have gone after Polly, or where they could have had a more aggressive. It seems like that there should have been a way out of that. They were clearly being defrauded. Right. So you would think that they would have some sort of leverage. Look, we're going to turn the FBI on you or something if you can, But it didn't work out that way. He just sort of it seems like you couldn't get away with that now, just disappearing and running away with a sack of money and vanishing.
Clearly criminal activity, but on the night of April 23rd, 1975, Pete Ham got a call telling him that his money was gone. So later that night, he met Evans. He had a shitload of whiskeys. Evans drove him home. And that morning, he hanged himself in his garage. So his suicide note was written to his girlfriend, Anne Harriet, and their son, Blair. It directly mentioned Polly, as directly as Tom Evans sang about him on Head First. The note was, Anne, I love you. Blair, I love you. I will not be allowed to love and trust everybody. This is better, Pete. P.S. Stan Polly is a soulless bastard. I will take him with me.
Well, unfortunately, he didn't take Stan Polly with him because Stan Polly lived to the age of 87.
Right, the ripe old age.
He was eventually convicted of some sort of scam in 1991. It was like some scheme he had going with an airplane manufacturing company that he scammed a bunch of people out of money, and he ended up doing. He was sentenced to probation, and then he had to pay back the money that he scammed, but he never did pay back the money that he scammed away, and then he lived to 87.
What a fucking prick.
He died peacefully with a big smile on his face.
And Pete Ham, dead at 27, his daughter, Patera, was born 1 month after his death. Mm-hmm. So to make matters worse, so this is all happening really quick, right? In May, Warner Brothers terminated the Badfinger contract, and around the same time, Apple deleted all of Badfinger's albums from its catalog. So it's like the band never fucking existed. Phase 4, The Death Rattle, 1979 to 1983. So for 4 years, I guess the remainder of the dudes are putzing around. In 1979, they put together sort of a bastardized version of the group and record the album Airwaves.
Yeah, well, Joey Molland was putting together a band, had a couple of like LA musician guys in it, and then Tom Evans happened to be around, so they invited him to play in it. So they're like, well, might as well call it Badfinger.
Right, one of those. Except not a good example of one of those. This and the next record are just whimpers. They're not really a part of the Badfinger story.
Barely canon, really.
Barely canon.
It does have the name on it, but
1979, you have a couple songs that I believe both were singles, Lost Inside Your Love and Love Is Gonna Come at Last. We're sort of in Air Supply territory, but they're serviceable songs. I give the album 1.5 stars.
1.5 stars too.
Nice.
Yeah. This record, Airwaves, has some kind of like late 70s trappings to it. There's some soft rock,
decent
like you said.
trappings. Yeah.
There's like
yachty.
There's a bit of disco, some disco
little
strings
yacht
and
disco,
stuff.
yeah.
There's some of it's kind of power pop still, like Skinny Tie kind of power pop sort of thing, as was the trend at the time. There are a couple of notable appearances. Nicky Hopkins plays on 3 songs. Very classic.
His crowning achievement.
And
have you ever heard his solo record?
No.
It's so bad.
Yeah.
It's right. Jamming with Edward.
That's all right, Nicky. And then also discography favorite, Andy Newmark.
Yes.
Makes another appearance.
Drummer extraordinaire.
He's on a track along with Nicky Hopkins, which is Lost Inside Your Love.
which is a good song, and I think
some,
belongs on the playlist.
Brings some much needed class to the proceedings.
Yeah, definitely. But then that kind of class is kind of gone from the next record. It's not. It's kind of comparable. The record itself, 1981, "Say No More," which thank God they did. "Hold On" is the only song I would really put on the playlist by Evans, but worth mentioning that he got his anti-Stan Polly screed out there. Rock and Roll Contract is on "Say No More." I give the record 1.5 stars.
I gave this one 1.
That's fair.
They had moved. They were based out of Miami at this time, and it seemed like they were kind of just down there, like partying and like telling people that they were Badfinger, and kind of just occasionally doing some music. Tony Kaye from Yes was in the band at this time.
That's right.
Didn't see that one coming.
No.
And this one had a minor hit because "Baby Hold On" went to number 56.
And it's a good song. I think that deserves to be on the playlist.
That one's kind of like a Hall & Oates kind of
sound. It's kind of good though. It belongs on there.
Yeah, that one's all right.
But
they had a top 60 hit.
Yeah.
In 1980, whatever this is, 1981.
That's kind of it, and that's the reason why is
that qualifies as the if you want to look for a happy ending in this story, that's pretty much that was it.
Yeah, I guess if you got to settle for one, because a couple years after that, November 18th, 1983, Tom Evans and Joey Molland got into an argument regarding Do Re Mi and from the Apple era, and also specifically Without You songwriting royalties. And after the argument, Tom Evans hanged himself in his garden at his home in Surrey.
I wonder what that argument was. So Without You was Tom wrote it, right?
Tom and
Pete Ham.
Pete.
Right. So Joey, no royalties from that probably.
He probably just wanted some of the large amounts of money they were getting
for the song he didn't write.
Right.
Yeah, which had been a hit for other people.
Right.
That's all. Okay.
So at this point, Badfinger is definitely done because Joey Molland was not an original member anyway, and then you just have Mike Gibbons. In 2005, Mike Gibbons dies at 56. And
it's Gibbons, damn it. Respect the man.
Of a brain aneurysm.
We're sorry, Mike
Sorry,
Gibbons.
Mike.
You seem like a fine dude.
You do seem like a nice guy, and your eagerly pop sense has served you
We're
well.
sorry you're the comic relief for this.
Spilling one out on this studio floor. In 2009, 1,000-year-old Stan Polly dies, as does Joey Molland's 62-year-old wife.
He's still in there in 2009. He's hanging around like Obama's president. Like but he's still around.
Joey Molland still walks the earth, one of the only living reminders that all this horrifying karmic shit went down with the band. These guys were absolutely seminal power pop, some of the best out there. And the first, this band was no Klaatu. They were the real thing. They weren't imitating the Beatles. They had some of that Beatles magic, but they had their own thing. And generally, except for those endless attempts at rocking out, they were endlessly melodic.
Why you got to take shots at Klaatu, man?
Why you got to
bring Klaatu into this?
Who are we going to get to do Klaatu with us?
I don't know. Is Sir Bodsworth Ruggles a real person?
Of course he is. All right. Well, so let's talk about
top threes.
Well, let's talk about their arc first. This is a strange arc. So we basically go from black and white to Technicolor and talkies. So we go from a narrow vision of pop into this Technicolor widescreen power pop that just gets bigger and bigger. But then these guys were choked out and left to die. And so their arc is a rudely interrupted one. Top 3 albums. Number 3 is self-titled Badfinger. Number 2 is Straight Up. Number 1 is Wish You Were Here. Worst album is Ass.
Well, we've done it again. We have exactly the same list, except I'm kind of torn on what to say is the worst album. Because all right.
It's Ass.
It's Ass, all right. Number 3, I have the same. Number 3, the self-titled Badfinger album, although I will say that No Dice was right on its heels. Number 2, Straight Up. Number 1, Wish You Were Here. And then, I don't know, do you include the last couple, like the post-Ham albums? Because those are I
wouldn't, actually.
Right.
I kind of wouldn't.
All right.
Or else I would say one of those.
Let's say I'll go with the same list. Ass. So we have the exact.
If we're doing everything, then
the last
Say No More.
Say No More is the worst. If we're counting everything.
Sorry, Tony K.
It wasn't your fault.
Yeah, it really wasn't. You did pretty good on it. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us. This is a sad tale, but hopefully you were emotionally uplifted by our entertaining and thorough researched spirits.
And do check out this playlist, because I bet you, if you like this kind of music at all, if you're at all
it's unbelievable
power pop fan, there are probably some of these that you haven't heard.
Head to toe, beginning to end, this is going to be one thrilling listen. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Definitely please subscribe and join our Facebook Live group for some inspiring debates.
Yes, the Facebook
rock fights.
Right, the Facebook discography discussion group is live. You'll be able to. We will interact with you there. You can tell us how angry you are at us or how much you love us.
Look out for tons of unbelievably exciting upcoming guests, and also in addition, some Patreon sidelines, brand new shows. Discography presents our Patreon content.
That's right.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.